I'm one of those people that, in truth, if you notice all week long, you usually don't keep the mic on when I'm speaking. There is a reason for that. In the true Irish tradition, you never know what's going to come out of my mouth. The other thing, a lot of times I don't like to necessarily talk from a prepared text, because I really do believe in the gift of the Spirit, and I believe in the gifts that God has extended to me, and I sometimes try to use those from more of a spontaneous fashion. But I believe is that it was kind of important is to, in preparing this integration piece, that I had to look over and reflect as though it were on parts of the week's experience. And therefore, when I left here last evening, I went back to the hotel and I wrote until about 11:30 last night. I went through all of our calendars, the music, what I remembered in my own notes, what I felt from the various types of experiences and that. And I tried to capture for myself, at least down in writing, some of the experience of this past week, so that we might have something that would help recall for us that have been heavily bombarded with so much, a way to begin to unpack some of the information. I must tell you, is when you're writing that late at night, too many things start meshing in together. And the degree of my own tiredness started to filter in. I do eventually get tired. And then it does happen even to the best of us in that context. And then, this week, men and women from all over the United States, particularly this weekend, are converging on a seemingly lifeless piece of desert earth to commemorate, celebrate, and recreate what they sincerely believe to have been a unique moment in history. They are recalling and retelling the stories about a very special visitation from beyond. Through the use of the mass media, modern technologies, and computerization, these men and women want to remind the world that we are not alone in the universe, and that according to their personal calculations, about 50 years ago this week, an alien spacecraft landed in the desert of New Mexico, in a little-known area called Roswell. They also want to let the world know, and to let it be known to all, that the primary response to the alien, the foreigner in our land, was fear, which responded in abuse. Counter that experience of thousands in the desert with the experience of you gathered here today. Last Saturday, 7 whole days ago, you came together from the 7 corners of our world, the north, south, east, and west, from as far away as the United Arab Emirates, from the tip of Canada to the toe of Florida, from New York City across our gut all the way to San Francisco, from across the seas, not unlike some of our ancestors, from the land of Italy, where you learned when you mix that special bloodline here in the States, you create a mixed marriage, at least if you're a Bostonian. You came as aliens, as foreigners in a way, and as strangers, weary, tired, weighed down with fear, trepidation, anxiety, questions, wants, wishes, and a smattering of what-ifs. You came not knowing what you'd be able to expect and what you would accept. And yet, you were accepted, you were welcomed, and you were let in. And to your individual surprise, you were met with smiles and words of comfort, eager hands to share your load, and even a pat on the shoulder when you needed it. You were surprised that your fears were invited in, and that your hands and your faces were met with welcomes of other smiles from other faces, hellos, and sincere joys. In the best sense of the word, you were made to feel like a guest in your own home. You were told you are special, and that your sisters were glad you had come. Stepping forward, you were welcomed as a special member of the family with whom you share a common vocation. In this fraternity of spirit and of truth, you came to commemorate, celebrate, and create the mission of Jesus Christ as the incarnation of the kingdom, indeed the incarnation of the reign of our God. Your message proclaimed together in one grand chorus of praise is that you are loved, cherished, and indeed called by a loving, caring, and exceedingly vulnerable God who seeks your efforts, your assistance, and your participation as co-ministers of creation, of the universe, and of your world. You were called to listen to the story of your salvation as it was written in the diversified, unique books of each other's lives. You likewise were asked to attune your middle ear to the task of hearing more than words, rather a message of real love. And in order to accomplish this goal, you'd have to speak with new tongues to old life situations. Your we very gradually became an I, that the monologue of others' inventories could be transformed into a dialogue between you in relationship with another. To prepare for this process of I speak, you were asked to put on the mantle of justice as the conversation engaged required an attitude of care, concern, and kindness, learning to speak with honesty and in truth. Prayer was the framework and the sanctuary of your celebration of God's presence in the real hall of ongoing conversation. And so how shall I begin this other form of a conversation with you? How shall I tell you of the grace moment of these last 7 days? What would it look like as a picture on the dossal of the Sims Life calendar? How would it all read in a book without an ending? What melody would do justice to the tremendous song of the heart which has been sung all week long? And so let me start before my pen runs dry and my hand and my mind truly become quiet. In the long journey to this chapter of Acts, a lot of ideas, thoughts, dreams, and visions were brought together. The journey began long ago in the Franciscan need to share the story of mission and the impact of gospel living. It began around small fires on the plains of Assisi and continues to the dining room conversations here in Faulkner, Maryland. The first experience welled up those small flames, and huge burning bonfires could be seen and felt for miles. This week, the light of Christ burned deep and wide enough to shine forth from the Paschal candle and light each individual flame of life, a flame both given and received. In this journey of commemorating, celebrating, and creating, the call to vocation as one in mission to the world, you, the members of this institute, have taken to heart your call, your mission. A mission that was proclaimed by Vatican II, especially in Perfecte Caritatis in Gaudium et Spes. Serious attention has been noted to John Paul's Vita Consecrata as a lived reality of the gospel mission of life. For one whole week, you focused energies on the often misunderstood term secular institute. You pondered what it means to be consecrated in the world. And the question posed more questions, not easy answers. And never was the answer totally clear. Yet all the while, there was a deep, abiding, felt presence of the gift of the Holy Spirit in your midst. As God walked here, as God walked within our midst all week long. What does it mean to be a consecrated person in the world? To be faithful to God's Spirit's mandate of claiming your vocation, your moment of visitation. To be faithful to self, to yourselves, and to your heritage. To further solidify the foundation of Armida Borelli here in this nation and on this continent. It must grow, it must expand, it must bring its vitality of message to our church. To honor its unique history as those who brought that former message to the shores via Barbara Ottinger and those early companions with the special tutelage of Father Stephen Hartigan. To provide greater clarity for those who look at each sim and wonder, could this way of life be what God wants for me? The assembly, which proposed the calling forth and for of the chapter of Mass, had absolutely no way of knowing what it would mean or produce. It took a tremendous act of courage and resolve to support its happening. It took an act of faith to believe that all that is of God will be truly blessed and that God will take it forward. In a fraternal spirit, you gathered to pray, to speak, and to listen. In the message of Armida Borelli and Agostino Gemelli, you have appreciated the gift that you are, the gift you are to each other, and the welcome gift you are to the church lived in the world. With the assistance of and for each other, you gathered in prayer, in meals, in dialogue, and even in rest. Bombarded as you were with ever-increasing engagement, you found an inner fortitude to move ever forward to the late hours of the night. Through a smattering of themes, you shared with each other, not the dogmatic pronouncements that this is the way and the only way to do it. Rather, a touch of humility has prevailed as you offered each other, "This is my experience," or "I believe this is what might be." Having said that, I'd like to revisit briefly the experience of these past 7 days. I'll share what insights into the SIM vocation I discovered through your work together. And I'll do that by offering words or themes which the day's presentations suggested to me. For instance, Dominic Monti's spiritual sharing during the opening prayer service and the enthronement of the gospel helped me to realize and accept that fear of falling can be a real fear, that the water won't indeed catch me. He showed me how this powerful emotion has a life of its own, which can lock God out, even when I most desperately need God in. By the way, did anyone else realize that the sacristy elves, Laura and Barbara, nearly brought the local fire department down on our necks when the smoke alarm went off that evening as they began that initial nervousness of getting things started? By the end of the first day's events, those sacristy elves, aided by the talents and skills of the liturgist Rosemary and our musician Susan, and with all the mighty support of the California 8 and those ministers of the chairs, pulled off some real splendid moments of common prayer and worship. I am indeed grateful for having been present to witness that ministry, that grace. On Sunday, our Franciscan roots was the theme of the day and the hour. Morning prayer stretched me to envision a faith built on the apostles Peter and Paul. Dominic Monti sketched the mind to wrestling with my personal vision of Francis as I was asked to reflect on the myth versus the reality. I was asked to see the true value of Franciscan spirituality and its attraction to a heart seeking God in the world. I was reminded that the life of Francis speaks to me and gives me values to measure my journey by. Agostino Gemelli, in assisting the foundation of the Secular Institute of Missionaries, chose Franciscan values that speak to a single woman's journey in the world as a consecrated person. As Dominic noted, these values were complementary, being brother and sister to one another, where we discovered that fraternity was mentioned over 3,100 times by Francis in his own writings. Minore, as one open to receiving, not clutching and clinging. Mission, feeling as one being sent. It is in mission that I express my love of God, a God who has sent me into the world, a true witness. Prayer is my dwelling place with the Most High, good Lord, where I provide space to hear God. And finally, love, which gives life to all the values. It is how I am called to imitate Jesus in his incarnation, crucifixion, and resurrection. Jesus indeed is the personification of the embodiment of how much God loves me. Talk about stirrings. Imagine the scene for that first small group sharings and large group reports. How silly and infantile it probably seemed at the beginning, being asked to share what everyone already knows, don't they? I noted the varied responses with many common themes from the groups as members shared their thoughts about what Franciscanism is for me, its benefits and its deficits. The shyness of groups slowly dissipated as each group shared. The room slowly beckoned in the Holy Spirit, and humor intervened when we were told by one group leader that she was instructed to speak in German. Jan's tiny print reminded me that one day I will indeed need glasses. The energy level in the room rose as the quality of risk-taking increased. Groups talked about letting go of old images and traveling towards new. And they likewise spoke about the personal cost of their love relationship with God. Sunday afternoon was the first sign that what man proposes, God disposes. In other words, if you want to make God laugh, tell him that Barbara Ottinger's talk will be confined to 15 minutes. Barbara's personal history opened doors of sharing which built up not only a knowledge of her own vocation in life, but stirred others to look at the small pinnings in their vocation. In welcoming me into their stories of how the Lord brought them to SIM and your unique vision of SIM, each panelist shed light on the personal as well as the communal aspects of this consecrated spirituality. Leo Tolstoy once said, "Everybody thinks of changing humanity, and nobody thinks of changing himself or herself." Barbara, Joan, Elsa, Lucy, and Mary Lou's offering of the heart proved Tolstoy to be wrong. Their stories reminded me that each one's presence and membership in an institute can never relieve me of my personal responsibility of standing alone before the face of God and there being transformed. Fraternal life can touch many areas of my heart. It can lead me to and support me in decisive moments of life. But there is a space in each of us that no group or human relationship can touch. Only God can. That evening found me worshiping God in a spirit of gratefulness, both in a Eucharistic way and in prayer for those present and absent. Father Cashin's gentleness once again told me of the gentleness of Christ, who invites us to be able to share. The bell of solidarity began to ring within this group as the gift of the day came to an end. Good morning, good people, and the awareness that the gift was mine again as a day honoring our Italian heritage commenced. Morning prayer introduced the theme as my prayer reflected the call to a faith-filled life modeled on those first martyrs of Rome. The song of prayer reminded each, and especially me, that behold, the Lord shall come, and with him all his saints, and in that day there shall be great light. One could almost hear that their support as together as all present praised the wonders of our God. The leader of the saints of the day was an energetic, faith-filled, 83-year-old gifted Irishman from Boston, Sister Claire Fitzgerald. Who would have believed that I sat in the presence of Boston royalty as the first cousin of JFK shared her vision of the church and the millennium? Well, even if she wasn't JFK's first cousin, any family would be proud to have her with them. I was struck by her grasp of history, paradigms, and her call to light the flame of purpose in accepting the mission in today's world. Remember the quote of Yeats, "We fed the heart on fantasy, and the heart has become brutalized on the fire." She reminded me that it is okay to live in the chaos, and that stability is a stagnation that kills. She called out to all struggling, praying, or holding on in the darkness to be women who are deeply holy signs and sacraments in this world. My sanctification is now. So what do I want to be caught dead doing? Yes, I discovered that God truly is Irish, or at least Jesus Christ is. But I also discovered that I am called to embrace the mystery of the here and now. Kathy Malley's portrayal of Armida Borelli's biographical brought a mythical legend to life, and even beyond life. Her vigorous interpretation of Armida's life made me feel her presence in the room. Imagine that presence moving again as Ursulina, in her humble, very lively, passionate description, made the language barrier seem unimportant. She wore out more than one interpreter. And her personal charisma captivated hours of attention. Rita, Ursulina's traveling companion and special support person from the General Council, mastered her spirit and communicated in English the love, joy, and hope Ursulina had put forth about her friend, her guide, her sister in faith, Armida Borelli. I greeted Armida on the face of Ursulina. Each person's hagiatus, their thisness, their who we are, is often best expressed in honesty and simplicity of a story. The story truth is profound and touches the heart in unique and powerful ways. Communal stories told over a dinner table are as formative and educative as they are as entertaining and endearing. Tuesday's gift celebrated our American experience. Today I was to be present for a celebration of these women in the church today and into the next millennium. I felt my prayer as we honored our loving God, the creator of women, in God's own image. I was reminded of the song of wisdom that called forth life, and that the essence of life is truly love. The highlighting of the letter from Augustina Marchetti Dori by Rita Hebe ascended and accentuated the three parts of the letter. In the final section on creative meditation, I heard a true call to preaching the gospel of womanhood, the gospel of beauty, love, and grace. Here the vulnerability of God was introduced, and Friar Jude would take that theme to other steps as he reminded me that God chose to be vulnerable to me. Imagine God welcoming and thanking me, God really loving me into eternity. The Tuesday panel presentation with Ruth and Marianne, Irene, Jane, and Kathy called to mind the truth that our spirituality is never ahistorical. These women are the signpost which I discovered. Their lives are the enfleshment of dry bones moving forward and pointing to this gift called consecrated life. Theirs are spiritual lives that challenge, model, and recreate the gospel of truth for today. Their personal journey and commitments express a spirituality that is elusive and incarnational. Such honesty and truth moved my heart, and I witnessed truth leading once again to trust. I also saw that their message is universal yet personal, historically and ecclesially conditioned, but committed to reform. By no means an exhaustive description of a heritage so ancient and so rich. The sharing brought me further along the journey rather than to a definitive destination. And Father Mel Brady's ongoing willingness to be a learner stirred my own spirit of humility. Tuesday's evening get-together let everyone know that God has a sense of humor. Who will forget the famous MC team of Gertrude and Heathcliff? The problem-solving complications of soap. The singing and dancing Rockettes known as the Great Eight from California +2. Midnight on the beaches and glasses on the head. Futile attempts at line dancing as Emma strutted her stuff out for the best of aerobics. Or Ursulina joining in the group dancing and the singing. It was indeed a very special get-together. God partied in our midst that evening. Futile attempts at line dancing as Emma strutted her stuff out for the best of aerobics. Or Ursulina joining in the group dancing and the singing. It was indeed a very special get-together. God partied in our midst that evening. Wednesday called us out of the past into the present, and I prayed for God to fill this day with new breath, and God answered my prayer, spoken in common with a psalm of wholeness. Kathleen Moffat's presentation on celebrating and praying the present with docils and tabula reminded me of my own experience of falling in love. Like Aspects of Love by Andrew Lloyd Webber, I realized that love changes everything. It did for Francis and Claire, and it does for me. What can one do in the presence of such wonder if not be grateful? Grateful for all the good that God gives and yet has given to me. Such gratitude provides a constant source of hope and love, unbounded generosity and love. What will the docile of my own life look like? Will it cut across the gut of my personal experience to reveal my own multiplication of loaves and sharing of grapes? I centered in on the images and the messages about listening and heard deep within the power of listening is keeping the vigil of mystery. And all these with whom I share my Franciscan heritage are truly angels of awareness. It was on this day, having toasted and celebrated life in God, that this group ventured to share and prioritize their felt needs. As I listened, I was impressed with the unity of understanding within this group and the desire to grow by living into the challenges that are ahead. The Eucharistic celebration and its explanation of Jesus' special love for the woman at the well let me contemplate Jesus' untiring, infinite love again for me. And that brought forth my own fountain of love and deep appreciation as together we asked for forgiveness that evening. I left for the night feeling the Spirit's calm presence and message. All is right. I am here. Thursday morning prayer reflected the prayer of Taizé. As its soft sequence beckoned that I open up and reclaim my vocation. Today's panelists gave penetrating images to reflect on and share. The talks of Jeannie, Barb, and Helen again captured the importance of gratitude, humor definitely, and imagination. The angels blessed those sharings as a call to walk, sit, stand, or sleep in the desert went out to all. It seems all the days individually and collectively stirred my heart to reflect on the poetry of an early 20th century armchair philosopher, James Allen, who once wrote, "You will realize the vision and not the idle wish of your heart, for you will always gravitate toward that which secretly you most love. You will fail, remain, and rise with your thoughts, your visions, and your ideals. You will become as small as your controlling desire, as great as your dominant aspiration. What then is the vision, the desire of my heart? To put it biblically, what is shut up in our bones and burning within me? What is it that I must preach? For to fail to preach it would mean my own ruin. My treasure and my heart will be found together. What is the deepest desire of my heart? What does it really want?" Seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary was the message of the celebration of the Seder that evening. As I reflected on the journey from Egypt into the desert and towards the land of milk and honey, I felt a living witness to the message of Christ. I felt solidarity with those who struggle to live in justice and freedom. Brace yourself and act with care, as we are called to be ministries of service in the world of Jesus Christ, in the world where we live. Live out the gospel of Eucharist. Friday found a tired, taggart group who absorbed so much that for the weeks, months, and years, it will all still be being unpacked and played with in thought and in prayer. Just when nothing more seemed to be able to be spoken, Dr. Juan Hinojosa surprised us with real shifts in thinking. He spoke to the heart of the mission as the church scattered when he challenged me to move from the church having a mission to the mission having a church. Talk about celebrating the reign of God. He made it real. He called me to be attentive to the needs of the 99.9% and to refocus my own lenses, my own prejudices, my assumptions, my fears, my language, and to develop true habits of the heart, ways and attitudes of connection which communicate and connect the reality of God incarnate. And as he did this, I felt the press again of mystery. Unlike an Agatha Christie mystery, a divine mystery is never solved. Its depths can only be plummeted. Its bottom can never be reached. What will I do in response to such a call, except anoint myself and others to go forth in mission? As I continue the journey of personal exploration and understanding of this past week, I will remind myself that a certain amount of uncertainty will always be mine as I, with you, live out the gift of faith. May that uncertainty and unsureness about what will be, in a sense, touches upon my poverty. Kathleen Norris, in the Cloister Walk, said so, and said it so well when she repeated, "To make the poem of your faith, we must learn not to settle for false certitude, but to embrace ambiguity and mystery." To paraphrase another poet, what we've done, what we have been trying to describe this week, are conditions of life that words may only be able to hint at. What we have used logic to try to corner perspectives that may be laughed at in our attempts. The Spirit of God is playful, and it will behoove us to join in that playfulness and maintain a sense of humor toward life. It is a great and wonderful gift of love given to each of us. Live it through commemorating, celebrating, and creating, realizing that all the while God is indeed with you, and God truly loves you. Ask me how I've known. I've seen it written on your faces all week long. Thank you very much.